I'm touching myself tonight.
Deadpool and Wolverine is a movie that I have been cautiously optimistic about for a couple of years now. I've not exactly hidden the fact that I haven't really enjoyed the MCU since the heights of Endgame, and that the recent run of MCU movies and shows have been pretty damn bad overall. There were a few moments where things seemed like they might be turning around, but it was to no avail as we just continued the same direction of mediocre at best movies and shows that went nowhere with this whole multiverse idea. Throw in the actor playing the MCU's next big bad in Kang being caught up in all kinds of controversy, and it's clear the MCU has been in trouble the past few years. Well, the release of Deadpool and Wolverine has certainly changed my optimism for the MCU as a whole. Deadpool and Wolverine is the most shamelessly entertaining MCU movie I have watched since the Infinity Saga. It's by no means a perfect movie, and it does have some issues that I will of course get into in this video. But the big question surrounding this movie was, will Deadpool and Wolverine save the MCU? And I intend to answer that question in this video. Between the clear acknowledgement of the failings of post-Endgame MCU, the massive box office haul this movie is pulling in, and the sheer quality of the movie itself, we're going to dive deep into the question of whether or not Deadpool and Wolverine has actually saved the MCU. Just before we do though, a quick reminder, our disc plate giveaway is ending soon. If you want to be in the running to win some free disc plates, follow my Twitter and my Instagram. I did also post some behind the scenes of the Deadpool and Wolverine premiere over there too, so go chuck them a follow. But let's dive into Deadpool and Wolverine. I think the best way to summarize Deadpool and Wolverine is pure, unapologetic entertainment, which is something the MCU has been sorely lacking in the past 5 years. Ryan Reynolds and Shaun Levy, I can never pronounce it, just bear with me, clearly went into this movie with the pure motive to just entertain and celebrate the Fox universe, and they've done exactly that. Deadpool and Wolverine is not only an entertaining cameo fest, but also a film that has a lot of heart at the same time, which is a thread the previous two Deadpool movies also had. As stupidly funny and entertaining as they were, there was always that profound side to them that made you love the characters beyond just the jokes. And Deadpool and Wolverine follows suit. This movie is what happens when a few best friends who have a deep love for the characters they're playing come together to make a big budget blockbuster, and it's exactly what it needed to be. This movie didn't need to be the next Citizen Kane to be labeled great. It simply needed to pay homage to what came before, entertain, and make us laugh. And to act like this movie does any less than that would just be a flat out lie. But let's get into the film itself. Deadpool and Wolverine is a Deadpool movie through and through. Deadpool is abducted by the TVA to help save his timeline from destruction and recruits Wolverine to help him save it. It's essentially a buddy cop movie in a way with the funny man and straight man duo. The story isn't overly complex, nor is it anything that we haven't seen before. But it's what it needs to be to allow the entertainment factor to take over and the characters to stand out. This movie is a nerd's wet dream, plain and simple, and that's okay because that's what works for a Deadpool movie. There are certain things you can do with the concept of a Deadpool movie that you simply can't do otherwise. Is this movie a revolving door of cameos? Yeah, it is, because it's a nod to what came before. The movies that walked or fumbled, so massive franchises like the MCU could take off and soar to new heights. Now, just in case you didn't clock the spoiler warning at the beginning of the video, spoilers ahead, but seeing characters like X-23, Elektra, Sabretooth, Pyro, Chris Evans' Human Torch, which was a fucking masterful cameo by the way, setting it up like it's Captain America and then hearing Flame On, this is just one of the funniest uses of a cameo I've ever seen, and Chris Evans clearly had a lot of fun here. And of course, my personal favorite cameo in this movie, Wesley Snipes' Blade. It was great to see. Now, there is a problem undoubtedly with cameos and the reliance on member berries in modern movies and shows. Just look at Star Wars as the worst example. But this movie feels like it actually earns them. It's not telling this separate story in which these cameos are shoehorned in. This, again, is a send-off for the Fox universe and a love letter to Marvel. Simply a feel-good experience that actually rewards viewers and longtime fans of the franchise with hilarious nods to what came before. Yet it doesn't make it the whole purpose of you being there. It's not one of those situations where the story is utter garbage and they try and bail themselves out with cameos to make people forget how bad the story is. Again, like a certain franchise. My favorite scene of this movie, and I'd argue the best scene of the movie, is one that involves a cameo character, that being X-23. But it wasn't because it was a quick member-berry nerd point moment. It was much more profound than that. Wolverine in this movie is a complete mess. He's a character that made some terrible mistakes that made him a disgrace in his world, and the film dives deep into his trauma and the guilt he carries with him. And in a rare moment of vulnerability, he opens up to X-23, and for those who have seen Logan, we understand the context we need as to why these interactions are so great. Wolverine in this moment needs to put his guilt and trauma aside to help Deadpool and the ensemble to stop the evil threat. But he simply thinks that little of himself that he says they've got the wrong guy, to which X-23 says, "You were always the wrong guy until you weren't." This was amazing, and I wish they didn't put it in the damn final trailer, to be honest. But this is how you do it. This is how you have cameos without making them obnoxious scapegoats for your writing shortcomings. They actually service the characters within the story. This is a major moment and turn for Wolverine as a character here, and it's done very well. It's not a finger point moment, it's a great character moment, and again, it's probably my favorite scene of the movie. Now, touching on this being my favorite scene in the movie, it's also one that doesn't have a joke. Make no mistake, this movie is hilarious and most of the jokes land very well, but there are a few scenes here where they actually took the jokes away for a second. There's a scene where Deadpool explains to Wolverine that his entire world is within a picture and that he needs to help him save it. I was waiting for the joke to come, but it didn't. It showed restraint. Same goes for that X-23 scene. It showed restraint. And for a Deadpool movie to show restraint on the jokes when the vast majority of modern MCU movies don't is really telling that this is a different kind of MCU outing. This isn't a part of the content factory line at Marvel Studios that is simply following an outdated formula to get product out there. This is different, and I appreciate that. This movie also just straight up basically says that since Endgame, the MCU has been shit. And I will say, at least they're aware of this, and the fact Kevin Feige actually let this go does indicate to me that there is a change of direction coming for the MCU. Deadpool says, and I quote, "Welcome to the MCU, you're joining at a little bit of a low point." This is the kind of self-awareness that I was looking for in this movie, not pretending like everything is fine, actually acknowledging the shortcomings. It's great. The referential humor of this movie is probably the best of the 3 Deadpool movies, if I'm honest. The scene where they take the piss out of Hugh Jackman's recent divorce caught me off guard. Or Henry Cavill's Wolverine and the DC shade. Or the smart fourth wall breaks littered throughout the entire movie. It just works. It doesn't come off as forced, it feels natural and in line with what you expect from a Deadpool movie. It was just refreshing to have an MCU movie that just wants to entertain you instead of lecture you. Recently in the MCU, you could just feel like you're tuning into a Marvel movie or show and just being told how much of a shitty person you are. This film just doesn't care about that, it's just there to entertain you. And isn't that the whole reason we go and watch these movies? To be entertained? It's refreshing that this movie actually remembers that. So I've been singing this movie's praises so far, but we're obviously diving into the whole did Deadpool and Wolverine save the MCU question, and here's where we get into the reasons why maybe it hasn't quite done that. This movie, as good as it is not perfect. It does have a few problems that did bother me a little bit, and I'd be remiss to ignore them in this video. One complaint I'm seeing a lot of people have about this movie is that the first 2 Deadpool movies were about Deadpool, but this one is about Marvel, so it just doesn't work as well. And to be fair, I think that's actually a really fair criticism. Personally, it wasn't really an issue for me. I think it works as a Marvel love letter and send-off for the Fox universe through the vessel of the only character in which that would be possible. But what did bother me was certain elements of this story. First and foremost, the pacing of the story. The pacing at times is just not great. It does drag in the final 30 to 40 minutes, so much so they even joked about the pacing dragging in the movie itself. It wouldn't surprise me if they saw how it was coming together in the edit and then they shot a quick fourth wall break referencing the pacing where Deadpool says something along the lines of, "Stay with us, we're almost done." Which if that was the case, that's actually pretty funny to be honest. but the pacing undoubtedly became a factor for me when watching. I think this is probably 10 to 15 minutes too long. It is the longest of the 3 Deadpool movies, and it is the one with the worst pacing. I don't think that's a coincidence. Another one of the larger issues I had with this movie is its villain, Cassandra Nova, who I was actually really enjoying in the first half of the movie, but as you get into the third act, she becomes as generic a villain as you'll get. Emma Corrin was really entertaining in the role and clearly having fun, but then she just becomes generic, destroy everything because I'm bad kind of villain, which I just found a little disappointing, especially when they went the route of her helping Deadpool and Wolverine initially, adding a more complex layer to the character. And then they pretty much just throw it away in the third act to just get the most generic villain plot going. Then there was Paradox, who was funny, but I wouldn't say was a good villain. He was fine, but he was more of a plot device to get Deadpool and Wolverine together so we could have the buddy cop movie that we got. But the final issue that I had with this movie, and this is a minor issue, but some of the action was a little CGI heavy, to put it lightly. It was still great to watch, don't get me wrong, and I am nitpicking here, I 100% admit that. But in terms of flaws, that's about where it ends for me. It's a great movie, but it's just not quite perfect. And it's hard to say a film is going to save the MCU when it does have some clear issues, even if the movie was that fun that I realistically don't really give a shit about those issues all that much. So, what does Deadpool and Wolverine mean for the MCU? Well, it's been a pretty hectic couple of weeks for the MCU with the launch of this movie. It's been received extremely well, it's making truckloads of money. And then there was the announcement of Robert Downey Jr. returning to the MCU as Doctor Doom, which has driven crazy levels of hype regardless of how you feel about it. It definitely does feel like things are changing, and that we're not just meandering through this aimless multiverse saga anymore. I think Deadpool and Wolverine is certainly going to help course correct the MCU back into something that we enjoy with almost every passing installment, instead of whatever the past 5 years has been. Even though Deadpool and Wolverine's story doesn't necessarily mean a great deal for the future prospects of the MCU, it's more what this movie means for the MCU as a whole. And I think the announcements at San Diego Comic-Con this week have definitely proven that the MCU is changing. It is course correcting. It's not sticking with its original failed plan that we've been enduring the past few years with movies like Multiverse of Madness. It seems that the MCU wants to return to its roots a little bit, which you may say is desperate, but to be honest, I'd rather see them do something people deem desperate and actually get the MCU back to a point where I get excited about upcoming movies again. I haven't really had that in a long time, with Deadpool and Wolverine being the only real exception. Realistically, the story implications of Deadpool and Wolverine don't mean really anything for the ongoing MCU story, so I really can't sit here and say it's going to save it. This, at the end of the day, is a love letter to Fox. It isn't a movie that was sweeping in to put together the scattered corpse that the MCU has become over the past 5 years. It wasn't a movie that was trying to save the MCU, and you just have to watch it to know that. And I mean, there are still projects like Agatha that honestly I'd be surprised if anyone is really interested in. The Blade movie also seems to be in production hell. So we're still probably due a few more bumps along the way before things really turn around. It's not as if Deadpool and Wolverine dropped in and all the MCU's problems went away. There's still a lot of work to do. So although I love Deadpool and Wolverine, I don't think it's the savior of the MCU that I think a lot of people were hoping for. I think what the movie represents is certainly signifying a change of direction though, and hopefully that direction is a hell of a lot better than the failed multiverse saga. So guys, what did you think of Deadpool and Wolverine? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. We've got a massive one coming for House of the Dragon very, very soon. And a reminder to check out my Twitter and Instagram, where I have posted some behind the scenes looks at the Deadpool and Wolverine premiere. So check them out, and until next time,